Hi all CMG-141 students. Demo here today for our P9 vector vinyl design project. There are a couple files that accompany this. As we've looked at earlier in the class, we're going to work our way backward from all the production processes that we output and create our graphics with toward the layout and design process to make them. So we're trying to look at everything holistically. So a couple of things that I want to look at first. I need to know what I'm making. In my case, I've measured my laptop and I'm going to be building a decal to fit the back of my Mac laptop, similar to something like this. Not exactly the same, but a decal on the back of the laptop. So if that's what you're doing, you want to measure that object. If it's a cell phone, you need to measure that object. Are you going to use the entire object, or you need to offset your graphics on the inside? What is that measurable area that you're going to want to work with? So in my case, that's natively going to translate to document setup. I'll go back to that. The other thing that I want to look at is what goes on with the intricacy of design. We'll have covered this in the class previously, but what we don't want are we don't want incredibly overly complex paths that have to be cut out, because you got to remember every single little path cut is going to be a fine cut that takes time. And if your lines are too thin, kind of that 1/16 of an inch range and under that we discuss in class, you're going to find that your vinyl decal is going to get cut all to pieces. So we'll keep that in mind, the equipment that we're outputting on and then the object that we're going to be building toward. So if you look in the P9 file, what you find is there is a zip file called dog demo. You can download that and access it. I've already downloaded it in my downloads, so let's kind of show this quick. On Macs, that download will actively uncompress. On PCs, you will need to go ahead and right click on that zip file and tell it to uncompress the contents. If you need to look that up, I've placed a couple of links on Learn It Stout having to do with zip compression, so you can look that up. What you want to get is inside of it the files that we'll be working with. So what I've done, as we discussed in the prior session, is I've started out by picking a vector-based font. That's going to be the approach that I'm going to suggest working with if you're a very beginner to the process of working with the vector layout software. If you have some experience and want to do something more advanced, we can talk about that. But again, my requirement is going to be that you at least complete the base project. So the first thing I have is I have a glyph-based font that I've downloaded. I downloaded this from the website DaFont. There are many other sites out there that work, but just to show you, I've gone into font. They list it under dingbats, and I think mine was in the animals category. And I was able to find a font called CanDog right here that has nice, simple silhouetted outlines. This type of stuff is going to work really, really well for vinyl, while maybe this ladybug, for example, with complex dots and details that would need to be cleaned up ahead of cutting, that's maybe not the best choice. So I've installed that. If you install that on your side, installation is fairly simple, either Mac or PC. It doesn't really matter. You basically just take the file and double click on the font. It's going to pop up and allow you an installation option. Make sure that when you check these things out, as we covered in class, that you are downloading a legitimate font file and not something that's filled with a virus. So we'll cover that in class. The other file that I've given you after installing the font is a pre-built Adobe Illustrator design. That's what I'm going to work from right now as reference. So if I go in, this is the file that I'm working with. I'm going to give you a couple of tooltips to work with first. So first off, we're in standard layout view, which basically just shows me the image over a page background. If I hold the Command or Control on PC plus D key, Command or Control on PC plus Shift and D, I can switch between my transparency grid. That's going to be very useful. So I can Command Shift plus D. I'll toggle back and forth between transparency grid mode and sort of standard view. And then Command or Control on PC plus Y is going to give me outlines mode. This is what I want to see. This basically shows me the compound paths that the vinyl cutter would cut. I want these to be all united and merged. What I don't want are overlapping paths that are going to create unwanted cuts in my piece, because eventually I need to pull out all the areas that are in white to only leave the black. I need these unified. So what I'll do is go through kind of the process that I used to build this. Um, you're reviewing this right now outside of class, and then we'll have some room to discuss within the group as we come back together. All right, let's go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start new. If you check this document out by doing a file document setup, and then clicking edit artboard, this is going to show you what basically the document is set at from the beginning. So I'm going to go up to the top. I set this up to be around 9.5 by 14. I did that because I wanted to occupy sort of the inner area of my laptop. So I built the width of the document specifically to 14 inches and the height specifically to 9.5. So that's what I'm going to start out with, is setting up my workspace to begin with. I'll close out a couple unneeded files. So I'll run a file new, pop my document up. When it comes up, if your units are not showing, this is one of the first things that are covered in the base tutorials I had you watch, but my units are set to inches. So if you have points, for example, maybe not something you're familiar with looking at. Inches are what I want. I'm going to name the document per document specs. I typically always have the file name or the student name and section name included. So OSSK underscore CMG-141 underscore 001 as an example for a section. See your project file for specific naming for this project, but I'll name it. I'll set up my width to be that width of 14 inches and that height of 9.5 inches. We aren't going to need to work with bleeds at all. We'll cover this later in the course. It's set up to be designed for print output, but that really doesn't matter. Right now we have a 300 pixel per inch CMYK mode. For what we're doing, vector data is all that's really going to matter in the end. So I'll leave it as default and say OK. All right, so I have my artboard set up, and this should basically be the area that I want to work with on my laptop. Again, if I'm doing a phone, etc., I build my document to fit the size of that object. So I'm going to start out first with working with the general layout. Before I get going and working with all of this, I'm going to suggest that you set up your workspace. So the example I always like to use is generally when you're building a house, you don't have every crew show up at once. You start with laying the foundation in concrete, you then move to the framing. You have electricians come in, you have specialists that work with doing the walls, sheetrock, etc. They don't all come at once. You only need the right tools for the job. What you don't need are every tool that we have at our disposal and every one of our panels open. So I'm going to customize the workspace to start. So in my new document, if you look under your workspace, either under Window Workspace, or you can pull it up under the workspace shortcuts in here, we can go in and we can actually create our own customized workspaces. So what I'm going to do is just limit everything that I don't need. And I've got a big monitor, so I'm going to pop out these items so you can see. Here we have color selection. I really don't need that because I'm just going to work with one color essentially. I have a swatch preset for specific color coordination. Don't need that. I'm not going to work with the color themes in Adobe Online. I'm not going to work with really anything having to do with color. I'll pick that when I need it. Brushes, shapes, symbols, while I could maybe do some neat vector stuff with this, I'm not going to use them. I will be using stroke, absolutely. Gradient, I don't need. Our transparency based effects, don't really need that. None of Adobe stock stuff, don't need that. I really can dump just about everything in this and keep it down to the point where I maybe have the artboard tool to look at my artboards or my layers, which I'll want to analyze in a second. What I need to do is add to that. So one tool that I'm definitely going to be using today is going to be the type tool. So I may want to add that. So I'm going to go down to type and grab a panel for that. So I'll grab character type. That's typically going to come gang together with paragraph and our font selection tools. And I'm just going to take what I need. I'll take the character, I'll take the paragraph alignment, I'll drop the font configuration. I'm then going to go in and grab another panel that I'll need, which is going to be the path finder. That's going to be critical to creating united paths. So I'll take that path finder and I'm going to drag and align that into my sidebar as well. And basically now I have my tools to work with all put together. I can expand these panels if I want to look at them this way. I can rearrange them if I'd like to before or in advance of that. So maybe I'll put my Pathfinder up here as an example. Gained appearance-based effect with Pathfinder. I actually don't really need that much either, so I can dump that for my basics today. Transformation panels, etc. Alignment, I may want that. But basically, I'm going to build a custom space with just what I need. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and save that workspace. So for the sake of using the menu bar, I'll go Window, Workspace, and I'm going to create a new workspace. I'm going to call this Vinyl Layout. Now if I go back to working with this, I can either grab this from the workspace menu or I can grab it from the vinyl layout dropdown. Again, the nice part is I can just quickly set up my workspace, have the limited amount of tools, don't need everything in front of me, just what I want. The other thing I like to do is I like to free float my toolbar, and I like to have it gang so it's not a long setup like that. So if you like doing that, you can do that. I like to pop mine out here, so I will pop mine out here to start with. All right, I'm going to be zooming in and out and scaling and kind of moving the document around. This stuff should have been covered in the tutorials, but if you have specific questions about that, we can cover that in the lab sessions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out right now working between our different element setups and then look at combining them. So by that, what I mean is I'm going to show you every element I built. I started with a rounded rectangle. This applies a single stroke to the outline and no filled color. I then had some single about 1/8 inch or so lines that I've applied. I just used a line tool. This could be done with a pen tool. This could be done with a lot of other tools within Illustrator. I used a font image of the dog, and then I utilized some text. Now, I think this was, I'm trying to remember what this font was originally. I don't have this on my system now, so I'm going to use a more common font called Impact that should be on everyone's system. So basically, in my planning, I estimated that I wanted this inner box to be the size of my document. So essentially that 9.5 by 14, I wanted that to be built to the inside, and I wanted it to be about 1/4 inch. I then chose this dog font, and based on my estimates in the planning stages, I decided that I wanted this dog to be about 400 point to render it that size. I think this is the letter C in the CanDog font. Same with my text. My text, I knew I wanted to be a sans serif, and I wanted to be around 72 point in size, so roughly an inch had I had lowercase in it. So we'll jump back over, and what I'm going to do is create all these elements first and then look at combining them. So I'm going to start out with the outside border because that's pretty simple. And I'm going to go into our tools setup. So basic tool kind of conversations. Any of these items that I work with, if I select and hold, anytime there's a right side arrow for dropdown, I can select a secondary tool set, and rounded rectangle is what I'm going to start with. What I want to make sure with this is that I also take a look at the fill and stroke. I'm going to build out the thickness of the line by working with the stroke, not the fill. So I'm going to select this box and turn off the fill with the X out. I have the stroke selected. This is what I want to build with. I'll start out with this and then kind of do some customization. So what I'm going to do here, close my color window, I'm just going to click on the center of the box. I could drag this out like this and resize it, but since I know the size I want, I'm just going to click. This is going to pop up a rectangular box that is going to show me exactly what dimensions I'm going to start with. So what I did was I built my width of my document to be the 14 inches I was shooting for, and my height to be the 9.5. This should hug right to the artboard and essentially fit within the dimensions of the document. I'm going to check my corner radius. This I figured out ahead of time. I basically measured as if I had a little circle put in the upper corner of my laptop, and I measured the radius from the center of that circle. And I figured out that it was about a 1/2 inch that worked really well to have a nice rounded match to the rounded edge of my laptop. So again, I'm building the design functional to the place it's going to be viewed essentially for the end product. I want it to look similar to match. So I put it at a 1/2 inch. If I back out and say OK, here we go. I have received a path. And right now, if I bring it up, it snaps to the artboard. This is just what I want. Only problem, it's really, really thin. So I want to go in and take a look at the stroke panel. This is one that I left out on the right. In fact, I think I'm going to break it out just so we can really see it. When I look at the stroke panel, it's going to start out collapsed. If I click on the little menu bar to show options, it's going to drop down and show me all the options that I have to work with. Now we can use some of what we learned in class to calculate this. I want this to be 72 points, or I want this to be 1/4 of an inch. So that's a 1/4 of an inch. We use the guide of 72 points per inch to figure out size for physical output. So if I were to use this math, cut 72 in half, that's 36 point. So if I want to have a 1/4 inch line, 18 point should get me close to there. And if we take a look at it, after selecting 18, sure enough, that fits. The only problem that I have, if I go in and look at it, is that it's fit to the outside edge of my artboard. It's pushing beyond the white of the very edge. I really don't want that. So what I'm going to do is work with the corner radius that's applied to it. Where do I want to have it be? Is it going to be have stroke aligned to the center as it is right now? I can see the center path through it. Is it going to be aligned to the outside or to the inside? If I choose inside, it's going to snug right inside my artboard. This is exactly what I want. If I want to double check measurement on this or any other item, eventually I'm going to have you print a 100% to scale size of your vinyl layout. You'll be able to do that to check for the fine details and really make sure that we're kind of doing apples to apples comparison. But for now, if you don't see that, you can go in and select rulers and click show rulers. And what this will do is basically apply a viewable ruler to your document. So if I were to go in and look at that document right now, I can see my 1/4 inch areas from about here to here or here to here. It definitely lines up. We got what we got because we dialed in an 18 point line size. That point thickness translates directly to that 1/4 inch. So they should look really, really close. All right, let's go back out here. All right, so I'm done with my stroke on that. So I may just take that panel and dock it back up here for now. And I'll start building the other elements. So I've got the stroke in place. I'm going to work with the text next. And on this one, I've decided to pick, and I'll just grab the type tool, a font. I could either dial this up in the control strip, or I could utilize the character panel as well to do that. Maybe for today, just because it's kind of nicer to use, I'll use the character panel. I'm going to go in and select my type. Now I found this in advance so I can type it in. Otherwise, you can scan down and check out the different types that you have ahead of time. But I wanted impact because it was a font that I had. And I figured out that my text needed to be about 72 point. I'm going to select down to the text area and I'm just going to type. And I did all caps. The flying wiener. I think that's I before E. Anyhow, I'm just going to visually drop that down into the border with the idea that I want to have this merged eventually. So I'm kind of just building visually to start. I'm going to go in and do the same thing. So for my dog, I picked the CanDog font, which was previously installed. I'll load it. I figured out that my dog had to be about 400 point, so I'll dial that in. take my text tool, and I think it was the letter C. Oh no, maybe it was cap C. There we go. It was capital C. Can't have the flying wiener without a wiener dog, right? So I'm going to drop the wiener dog down here and pop him into the border. Heck, maybe I'll even nestle his nose in there, so there's a connection there. So I've kind of got my text, my dog, I've got my border in place. After this, I could make my lines if I want to. Now, I did straight lines, but you could certainly play with any of the line tools. So if I take line and maybe make like an arc, and then I'm going to just use the little flip icon to flip my fill and stroke. And I figured I wanted my stroke to be about 1/8 of an inch. So let me break my stroke tool out here too. If 18 point was a quarter, 9 point should give me 1/8 of an inch. And I'll kind of draw these out. So why not? Let's have some fun. I'll do something, sort of a little bit different than what I did before with my dog, and I'll kind of draw the line out. From here I can manipulate this much further. If I were to, instead of using the standard selection arrow, I can work with the direct selection tool, or A for the quick key. I can go in and tweak these points a little bit further, play with the way that the arc kind of plays out on this. Maybe that arc's a little tight. Maybe there we go. He's kind of jumping. I could then play further with the caps on this line. Maybe I want to round them out instead of being flat. There's a lot of room to kind of do some neat things with this piece. If I want to, I could copy and paste elements. As long as I'm building to my plan, generally, I'm okay with it for this class. So I could Command C to copy, Command plus V to paste, and move it along. If you hover on the outside of an object, you can rotate and adjust it. You can also easily scale. If you hold Shift, you can constrain proportions when you scale. There's a lot of things that I could do within this piece. So for now, let's just say that's kind of the way that it is. Maybe I want to copy this set out. Just an example. I can select a couple, hold Alt, click and drag out to make multiple copies at once. It's kind of a lot of ways that we can do this. So I'm building it a little bit different than my demo, but hey, why not? Let's have a little bit of fun with it. So there's my flying wiener. I'm going to take my panels and I'm going to pop them back here, or if I get all confused and delete them, no big deal. I can just go back to my vinyl layout menu for my workspace and reset that. And I got everything back the way it was. So basically at this point, I should probably make sure I save my document. I have not done that yet. Don't want to lose it. I'm going to take this and save this right with my course projects. I'll put this in my courses, CMG-141. Maybe my assignments, submission. I'll make a new folder. And I'll make a folder for my P9 vinyl. Why not? And save that right in there. All right, good. Now I'm organized. I know where my files are. I can grab them for submission when time comes. So with this ready to go, now we just need to check this out to see if it's ready to go for building. So what I'll do is I'm going to hit the Command plus Y. Again, that is just a view command. So if I go in to show you at the top, if I check View Outline, that is essentially Command Y. Go back to my GPU preview. That's where I found that. I can find everything that I need in here. For example, if I wanted to see transparency grid to make sure I didn't have a white object in the back, I can check that out with View Transparency Grid. I like using the short keys, Command Shift plus D for transparency grid, Command Y to jump to outlines. I'll be using that a lot in this piece. The other thing I may do is kind of take a look at the way that layers are set up, because layers are going to be really necessary in here. I can grab my layers out just to show you that right now this project is built on one layer and I have a whole bunch of paths in sublayers. So if I need to find an object in here, I can go through and I can select it by layer just by clicking on the layer to identify where the piece is, or I can select the piece and see where it is in the layer stack by the little color identifiers that are applied. So layers tab is going to be really, really useful. I'm gonna leave that up. I'm also going to drag out the Pathfinder because that is the tool that I'm primarily going to be using today to merge artwork. So with this set, if you look at my other example, let's go Command Y. And again, everything's merged together. If I jump back over to my other document that I just created, Command Y, what I see is what's really there from a vector standpoint. So where it says the flying wiener and where we have the dog, these are fonts. They have not been vectorized yet. I'm going to have to vectorize those fonts. These lines that we have, these have to be expanded. So basically what they are, they're what you call appearance-based effects. If I were to look under Window Appearance, it'll kind of show me what I have with what I select. So if I select this, it's showing me that this is a path. It's an 18-point inside stroke path. But that is a visual effect. It's okay if we're gonna send it to a printer or anything that's gonna convert it over to visual data, then it's gonna come out the way we have it looking. But if I send it to a vinyl cutter, it's gonna just cut lines where we see them in outline mode. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in first and I'm going to select this line to start. This is my outside line. I'm gonna go up to the top. I'm gonna choose Object, Expand, Appearance. And if I do it and go Command Y to check my outlines view, or Control Y, Command Control, similar, there we go. I've got that applied. Maybe I'll do this one in outlines mode. I'll select it, Object, Expand. Here I'm going to get a choice. Seeing this object apparently is having options for fill or stroke, I'm going to choose just stroke, say OK. There we go. Again, to show you, the other lines are not yet set. I can select multiple lines at once if I want to. Object, Expand. I'll take just the stroke here. Now I'm getting there. I've got the outside box. I've got the lines of the dog. Now I just need to expand these fonts. Two ways I can do fonts. I can choose the old method, type create outlines, which works as well. There we go, the dog's vectorized. Or I can run an expansion on it. Expand will also work for text. Similar type thing. So, and that did not work with that one, so let's try that again. Object expand. Let's expand it all. There we go. Now I have everything together and ready to go, at least together in the fact that it's expanded. Where I don't have it together is where everything merges and unifies. The problem that we're going to have is if I run a vinyl cut blade across this, it's going to go down the T and then go gank and nick right into my border. That letter T is going to pull out in the weeding and separation process. That's going to be an issue. So what I'm going to do is go take a look at exiting outlines, jump over to our other one, exit outlines. This has been totally unified. Here you can see that where the text mates with the border, it's all together. That's what we're going to want. So this is where the Pathfinder comes in. Most basic yet powerful tool for creating complex, interesting artwork out of more simple, primitive shapes that you can find in Illustrator and other softwares that support essentially path merging. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go one object at a time to start. The fact is you can probably select all of this and apply it, but we'll just do element to element. I'll start with the dog, and I'm going to hold Shift so I can grab multiple objects and click to the border on the outside. I'm going to go grab my Pathfinder, and there are a bunch of modes that we can work with in here. I'd encourage you to play with it because you can do some neat stuff with it. If I select just Unite as an example, here I have merged the border together. If you look at the dog is now merged in with the border. I'd need to go through and merge everything else as well. These lines are standalone, so that's not an issue, but this text needs to merge to the border as well. So I'm going to unite that too. And basically, from an entry-level, ready-to-go kind of standpoint, this document now in outlines mode I can see is merged and ready to go. I'll encourage you to take a look at Pathfinder for doing all sorts of things, because the fact is I can take it and create pretty unique artwork out of really simple shapes. Again, so if I took like, and I'm actually gonna apply a color to this star so you can see the difference. So I'll pick kind of two different colors. Here I've taken a second shape mode, make a star. I'll take that star and maybe pop it into the circle, just to show taking two different shapes, bringing them together. Instead of uniting, I can work with the minus front option as an example. If I look in my layer structure, which I'll show you right now, there's the star on top of the ellipse group. So minus front will kind of cut it out of that object that's on top. I'll take the top layer and minus it, remove it from the back layer. So if I do it, boom, there we go. So kind of neat. If I wanted to go in and play with this further, I could go in and manipulate points, perhaps with my direct select tool, to change the way that it looks. And I don't know, I've got sort of a pseudo crazy Pac-Man kind of thing going here. It just needs a little eye to cut out of it, right? Take it down further and maybe work with a simple circle shape. Ellipse tool. Check my outline view. It's just kind of neat the way you can utilize different basic shapes in Pathfinder to create a lot of things. So I'm going to delete this out for now and go back to where we're looking at. Basically, this is pretty well ready to go at this point. So I'm going to save it. Then what I'm going to suggest that you do to make the production process a little easier, because what you need to remember is we need to pull everything out in here. All the white areas need to go. It's going to be material physically pulled away. So I will show that with my demonstration ahead of the layout process, or maybe I have shown it to you already, depending when you're watching this. But we need to remove that material. So what I would suggest you look at doing is building a weed lines version. It's basically just gonna have relief cuts. So while you can submit this version for the digital side of the project, it's all ready to go. I'm gonna save a second version that I'm gonna call relief cut. And in this version, I'm gonna go in and use the line segment tool or maybe the pen tool with just a single point stroke. So let me check my stroke, make sure it is at 1 point, to create lines so I can peel out large areas. Now, what I'll do is just kind of take it to show you what you don't want to do is overlap your path. So when I go over, I should see, as I get on the path, the icon's going to change to a little circle. It's going to say I'm hitting the path. It's right on there, perfect. So let me zoom back out. When I'm on path, I'm just going to click and drag over, and it doesn't have to be straight, and I can keep it straight if I really want to. So it merges to the other path. And if I switch out outlines mode, I'll see a line there. It doesn't really matter. All that's going to happen is after the whole piece is cut out, the blade's going to come through and cut this line off. What that's going to do is allow me to grab this whole big chunk of negative material, which will be essentially whatever vinyl color I pick out, and pull it away. It just makes it a lot easier instead of having sticky material that you're trying to pull past everything. So what you might want to do is look at all your places where you have detail and pull that out. So maybe I'll take like right here. Let's simplify this area, and I'll just use the line tool again. For now, the line tool works. Oops, wrong one. There, maybe I'll unite those together. Now I can pull out just this little area around the text without having to pull all the other big sticky parts around it. And you can get more detailed if you want to and make it easier to do maybe like one segment of letters. So now I could go and literally pick out all these little individual sections of letters, so I don't have to pick the whole big piece. I just pick this little individual piece. And I could kind of go throughout this whole document and do that to make my process a little easier. And yeah, for those of you out there saying, hey, can you use other tools? Yeah, I wouldn't have to use the line tool. I could use a square shape. I could use I could use the pen to do maybe customized shapes if I wanted to. So go through and if I want to just hit around this area, so I'm not pulling out big pieces through here, although this might be a little overkill. I could certainly isolate elements that I don't want to have to pick around. It's definitely the finer corners and those kind of things that you're working with that can be a bit of an issue. So at this point, this would be ready to go. I'd have my main shape and I would have a bunch of weed lines or essentially relief cut lines for the weeding process to make it much easier to work with. All right, so this is intended to guide your creation process. This will then also accompany the lab that will be running in class. So the goal is you've reviewed this thoroughly, you've worked through the base constructs of your layout, and then you can come to class with specific questions. So we won't be demoing in class. This is your resource to hit. All right, thank you. See you all when we return to the group.